This is it, guys, the car that a lot of us have been waiting for, the brand new W206 Mercedes-Benz C-Class. It's finally here in Malaysia and it comes with quite a few surprises, both good and bad. So let's take a closer look at this baby S-Class. So the brand new C-Class comes in two variants here in Malaysia, no surprises there. The C200 coming in at 288,000 ringgit, and then there's the top spec C300 that goes for 330,000 ringgit. Both models are obviously CBU, fully imported for now from Germany, but the CKD versions will come in later towards the second half of 2022. Pricing wouldn't change that dramatically, but I would assume that they will go down maybe 15,000-20,000 from the current prices. Again, not such a huge difference for this market. Let's talk about the differences between the two variants here in Malaysia. Starting with the engines first, the C200 gets a 1.5-litre turbocharged engine with a mild hybrid system. If you remember correctly, the previous W205 did have a 1.5-litre at some point, but it was quickly changed to a 2-litre version. Now we are back with a smaller, downsized 1.5-litre turbo. But this time, it's a whole new generation of engines, the M254, which promises a lot more in terms of efficiency and long-term reliability. Now, in terms of outputs, this engine here, 1.5-litre turbo, makes 204 horsepower and 300 Newton meters of torque. That is similar to the 2-litre turbo that this car replaces. But on top of that, there is also a mild hybrid system that adds on, at certain points when you drive, an additional 20 horsepower and up to 200 Newton meters of torque. So this technically should feel a lot more powerful compared to the previous versions, although it's 0 to 100 times is pretty much identical to before at 7.3 seconds. That we'll have to drive to really experience. Going on to the full-fat C300 is where things get a lot more interesting. Under the hood is a proper 2-litre turbo from Mercedes-Benz, also within the same new engine family. And here it makes 258 horsepower and 400 Newton meters of torque. But on top of that, there is also the same mild hybrid system in the C200. This is an integrated starter-generator mild hybrid system, and at certain points in your drive, it can add on an additional 27 horsepower and 200 Newton meters of torque. So when you go full throttle for a short burst, this car can give an overboost power output of 280 horsepower. 0 to 100 is the same as before, 6 seconds. I think that's plenty fast for a car like this. Now let's move on to styling and the specifications of these two models, and here are where the surprises come in. In general, I would say that the C300 is a little bit underwhelming in terms of specs. It comes in a little bit lower than what I was expecting, whereas the C200 is exceeding our expectations in terms of a C200 spec level. So let's talk about the details. The most obvious difference is, of course, the appearance package. The C200 gets the basic avant-garde look, whereas the C300 gets the full-fat AMG line, very aggressive appearance package. So while the C200 gets the rather odd-looking front grille with vertical stripes, while the C300 gets the much more aggressive-looking front grille. And if you go up close, you can see the pins are actually shaped like the Mercedes-Benz three-pointed stars. The first time I saw this in pictures, I thought it was a bit garish, a bit over the top, but in the flesh, it's fantastic. I love it. Now onto headlamps. Both models share the exact same LED high-performance headlamps, which to me is a slight disappointment for the C300. Now traditionally, Mercedes-Benz Malaysia has always opted for the higher spec lights available for the C300. It's the same things they've done with the E200 and E300. But here we are missing out on the higher spec digital light for the W206. So if you see up close, you get this rather ugly looking reflectors within the headlamps. Doesn't quite fit the look of a top-end C-Class in my books. Now, don't get me wrong, functionality-wise, this is still top-notch. It has auto high beam and everything. But in terms of looks, this will not match all the pretty photos you see on the internet of the very new W206 C-Class. Now, onto the side, we see the wheels. The C300 gets the biggest wheel available, the 19-inch AMG multi-spokes, together with the bigger brake disc inside with cross-drilled rotors as well. Again, this looks a lot better in the flesh compared to in photos. Right here, I think these look absolutely spot on. Meanwhile, the C200 gets smaller 18-inch wheels with rather standard looking brake discs. Doesn't look as exciting, of course, but there is a slight difference here as well. The C200 gets full run flat tires, while the 19 inches in the C300 runs on standard tires instead. Now, this should mean that it's going to be slightly more comfortable in the long run, as well as being cheaper to maintain over the years. I think is a good thing. Now, onto the suspension, both models get the exact same agility control suspension setup, which may sound very advanced, but that's actually the most basic setup for the C-Class. On top of that, you got the sport suspension and the adaptive suspension, but we are missing out on all that here in Malaysia. We also miss out on the rear axle steering for the C-Class here, which is a bit of a shame. But of course, all that can be forgiven when the C-Class looks this good. In terms of proportions, this is a massive improvement over the W205, especially in the back with the slightly longer rear overhang, slightly longer wheelbase. Overall, this looks a whole lot more serious as a sports sedan than the previous C-Class did. In terms of size, this car is slightly longer, slightly lower, slightly wider. Overall, it really does look a whole lot better. Trust me, coming from a current W205 C-Class owner, this car makes me extremely jealous. At the back is a very big departure for the C-Class because for the very first time, we are now getting two-piece taillights for the baby Benz. Now, this means that taillights are split between the outside and the inside of the boot lid. And again, it has a very sharp look to mimic the much bigger Mercedes-Benz S-Class. This really nails the baby S-Class look. Again, I think this car looks a lot better in the flesh than the photos might have suggested. So if you're a little bit skeptical on the new W206 looks, I think just head over to the showroom. I think you'll be very pleased with the whole look of this new C-Class. But of course, being a new generation Mercedes-Benz, it cannot escape my personal pet peeve. The exhaust tips you see down there, absolutely fake. That's not an exhaust at all. The actual pipes are behind the bumper, pointing down. Of course, there are very good reasons for all this, but it just doesn't look good, does it? Is it just me? Or, I don't know, maybe let me know in the comments below. Now, onto the inside, the brand new C-Class looks absolutely fabulous. I would have thought that it's going to be very difficult to top the fantastic interior of the W205, but somehow Mercedes-Benz has done it. I am an extremely jealous boy right now. In the center here is the latest generation MBUX system, and the screen at 11.9 inches is just 1 inch short of the flagship S-Class model. This, of course, is going to take some getting used to having all the functions within the screen, but because this is where pretty much all car brands are heading towards, it's pretty much inevitable that at some point in time, you will have a car that is all screen. So might as well start now. For the very first time for Mercedes-Benz, the center screen here is angled slightly towards the driver to give a much more serious driving experience overall. I think, like I said, the whole interior just works fabulously well. From the top aircon vents, which are lit obviously together with the whole ambient lighting system, this is by far the best looking interior in the class. It's helped by the specs of this car as well. You may think that this car looks great, this must be the C300, but nope, this is the lower end C200. Both models now get this full leather covered dashboard. This may be artificial leather, but it looks like the real deal Nappa leather. It looks fabulous, even up close, even to the touch. And this extends throughout the whole top of the dashboard, as well as the door cards, both front and back. Now this is where I mean the C200 looks a lot better than it did before. But conversely, the C300 does look a little bit underwhelming. It does have a nicer set of steering wheel, it's got the sunroof and everything, but one thing it does miss out on is the higher end Burmester sound system. So both models here in Malaysia get the basic brandless audio system, which is a big shame. Now this is not so much in terms of audio quality, because even the basic system sounds just fine, but you do miss out on the bling of the Burmester speaker grills that's no longer available to Malaysian C-Class owners. One thing that is also a slight disappointment is in terms of build quality. From what I see over here, my first impressions are that the W206 has slightly cheaper feeling interior compared to the W205. From down here, all that plus this is slightly misaligned. It does feel a little bit low rent compared to the fantastic W205. Maybe I'm just being jealous. Perhaps it's as good as the W205, but from what I'm seeing, yeah, I think the 205 is slightly better in terms of build quality. At the back here, due to the C-Class being bigger on the outside, the interior does feel a lot more spacious than before. You do get a bit more legroom, a bit more headroom in the back here, so now it's slightly more competitive against the BMW 3 Series. What has been massively improved are the seat design itself. You now get a much longer base, and the angle I think is just perfect. I think I can sit in the back here for hours on end before I start complaining. Another good thing for the C-Class is the standard inclusion of these side window vents. Now these were missing on the C200 before, so like I said, this is a big improvement for the C200. The C300 have always had this, so it's pretty much par for the course for that model. Shoulder room is also slightly better than before, so you can now just about fit 3 adults in the back, but of course is not going to be very comfortable for longer journeys. This is much better as a 4-seater than 5. In the middle here, you got aircon vents, but under that is just a blank hole to show that this is not spec'd with a 3-zone climate control system. You just get a standard 2-zone system. Now that is a downgrade compared to the previous top-end versions, which is a bit of a shame, but at least the plastic quality down here has been improved from before. The boot size is exactly the same as before at 440 liters, plus you can also fold down the rear seats for a bigger load bay. What's new is the electric switch to fold the rear seats, which is a very nice modern touch. Also good is the inclusion of a power boot for both models, although we do miss out on the contactless kick to open function on the new C-Class. So that's our quick look of the brand new W206 C-Class here in Malaysia. Like I said, there are certain things that are exceeding our expectations and certain things that are not so good. But overall, I still think this is an exciting model for the Malaysian market. What do you think? Are you gunning for the CBU model, or are you going to wait for the CKD version in hope of slightly better pricing overall? By the way, if you are waiting for the CKD, be warned that the color options will not be as varied as what you see here. Very likely the reds and the blues will not be available as a locally assembled model, and that's the same with the interior colors as well. That's just the way it is. Let me know in the comments below, are you looking at the C200 or the C300, or would you rather go for the 3 Series? All that in the comments below. Thank you for watching and stay safe everyone.